Hello, welcome back to the James Ramblin' Reviews for yet another episode, and in today's episode I'm actually going to be reviewing Dune Part 2. Now before I get into that kind of stuff where I give you the context, give you how I feel about the movie, the plot and all of that kind of stuff, I just want to clarify this quickly by saying that I've actually got a new setup of the camera, because in the past, the James Ramblin' Show and stuff like that, I had this camera where it was like this built-in camera app that just had like 720p and it just didn't look really good. So it's this 1080p thing, so it's like HD quality, and it's pretty much a thing that I strap on the top of my laptop, plug it in with a USB cable sort of thing, set it up, and so it looks a little bit better. So if you're wondering why it looks a bit different now, then that is why. So with that out of the way, right, Dune, right, let's get into the context of Dune. So when it comes to Dune Part 2, right, this is a movie that I watched a few years ago, the first one that came out in 2021. There's also a 1980s version of this. This is also based on like a 60s book from Frank Herbert, who did this, like, it's like this sci-fi series with all this mythology. It's got like religious stuff, and there's all these like different clans, and it's kind of like these clans and stuff like that, and it isn't necessarily Star Wars, but it's like these people who live in this society on, like, it's a sand dune and all that. Like the Dune is, the whole Dune thing is they're in the sand, they're trying to survive, they're trying to beat the bad guys, and there's all this stuff kind of happening. And it's like, I'm pretty sure it's a few books, 2 or 3 books or something like that, and it's quite a movie. The first movie was about 2.5 hours long, and the second movie is about 2.5 hours long as well, so it's quite an experience. And I personally thought that the first movie, I did enjoy it. The first 30 minutes aren't the best parts of the movie, but once you get outside of that, the movie actually gets a bit better and a bit more interesting. But the second movie, right, I'll talk about that in a minute, but this movie just ends and it isn't as interesting, because the movie, it's just starting the beginning of the story, if you know what I mean. So once you get outside of that kind of stuff where I give you the context about Dune and the book and all that and the author and how this whole adaptation thing and how I felt about the first movie, right, so Dune Part 2 is pretty much the continuation of this story, where we get to see the main character, like Timothée Chalamet as the actor that was in Dune Part 2, the Paul Atreides, and there's this whole council called the Atreides and all of that kind of stuff. You've also got Zendaya in this movie, you've got Austin Butler, you have all of these, like a lot of these famous actors that show up in this movie. So it's continuing the storyline, and you get to see more of this world and how the world functions, and that is pretty much how I will describe it. Because if I go on about this movie, right, there is so much in this movie, I'm not even joking, right. I watched this movie twice. Like, I watched it a couple of days ago, bought it on YouTube, and then I re-watched it on YouTube, right, because I got it on YouTube Movies, so I had to watch it a couple of times because there's a few things I didn't really realise beforehand. There's a few many details, and then there's like subtitles you have to read for certain things, and all these kind of little hidden details. So outside of that, how do I actually think about this movie? So Dune Part 2, I would say, is actually the superior version of the first movie. Now what do I mean by that? So there's so much more that goes on, right. The first like 30 minutes to 40 minutes, right, it kind of sets the tone of what this movie is really going to be about, and then once you get outside of that, right, it just gets better. But I would say that the first 40 minutes of this movie, it was kind of done better than the first movie, you know what I mean? Like, there's actually kind of things happening, a bit of dialogue, there's a little bit of action in the start of the movie as well, and what this movie excels at is it does have a lot of action, there's a lot of warfare, and you see the battles happening, and there's just really cool visuals, right. That is an interesting thing about this, is like there's really cool visuals. There's also like the soundtrack where you hear the music and the loud music and all of that, and all the stuff in the orchestra, and that really does put itself on display here, because you know, you want to set the atmosphere for this world and you want to get immersed into the universe, and you do really get immersed into this universe once you sort of get more into the film. You get to learn about the characters and things of that nature. But I will say that there are a few points where I would say this movie isn't a masterpiece, right. I would say the movie is about a 9.5 out of 10, because yes, this movie also does kind of leave you on a cliffhanger, But it is a bit more of an interesting cliffhanger because Paul Atreides and Austin Butler get to fight and all of this kind of stuff so that he can become the ruler of this planet, and there's all of that stuff like where he's going to control what's happening next, and that's kind of what I got from it. But there was this point where, right, the movie is decent and there's good visuals and everything, but I do remember like later on, there's Anya Taylor-Joy, right, she's been in these films, like she's quite a famous actress, but there's this point in the movie where there's just a shot of her, right, just explaining stuff, and yes, she is a character, but it just kind of leaves a lot to be desired where you're just showing this scene and there's not really much that happens, you hear the dialogue and all of that kind of stuff. And there's also Florence Pugh in this movie, who, you know, there's points in the movie where Florence Pugh, she's in the movie and then she isn't in the movie, and then the characters, like some characters are in the movie for like 20 seconds and then there's characters that are in the movie for the entire experience, so that was kind of weird where you kind of see them, you kind of see the characters but you don't, so that it's not a masterpiece. I'd give it about a 9.5 out of 10. There was so many ways in which I could actually describe this movie, but that is my best way to do it. So if I hope you enjoyed this review, right, and stay tuned for more like it, right, and maybe you'll like this new kind of camera with the 1080p. I myself, right, you can see me kind of moving around and stuff like that because I'm still trying to get used to this camera. So yeah, that's kind of it, right. See you next week or whenever I do another James Rambling review episode. So yeah, bye.